Allan here, chatting with Matt Danner, one of the coolest people on the planet. I'm excited. I said this before when I talk to voice actors, especially like this. If you've turned on your television in the last 20 years or whenever, there's a good chance you've seen something he's done or heard a voice that he has a character or a cartoon that he's voiced. Muppet Babies comes to mind right away, but I mean, there's many other things that you've done. He's an Emmy award-winning writer, director, and producer. And of course, the Emmy comes from Disney Junior's Muppet Babies. Yes, is that
Yep,
correct?
that is correct.
So I grew up, well, I shouldn't say I grew up watching it. I watched it with my son when he was younger, and we have recently gone through the archives again and rewatched it because it was such a great show.
Well, thank you.
But you've done other cool things too. So Gravity Falls, so many different things. But thanks for hanging out today. I appreciate your time.
I thank you for having me. Hello, and I just appreciate getting a chance to hang out and chat.
So you have a lot going on behind you in your
Yeah,
background.
and
I love
all around
this.
me. Yeah.
So when people see this, or if you're listening, it's just a lot of memorabilia, it looks like, from your career. So outside of the obvious ones that we've mentioned, what are some projects that you've worked on that really would be considered like capstones of your career that you feel like have, are important to you? Obviously, winning an Emmy is a big deal, but other things that you've done that you are proud of and sort of add to the moniker of this wild life you've lived in a world that's so different than most people are familiar with.
Yeah, I'd say so just for context, this is a garage that I turned into a studio actually pre-COVID. And I
Okay,
put
that's
and I put
cool.
and I put and so there's a little recording booth there. This is my drawing desk that you're on now, my drawing and writing desk, and I am surrounded 360 with toys.
I
So
love it.
yeah, so it's called the Toy Box is the name of the office. So it's a good name. And thankfully, during the earthquake yesterday, nothing fell. So I had
Oh yeah.
one little figure that fell on my computer, but that was it. Um, but anyway, yeah. So I'd say in terms of projects that sort of I could point to and say, that are, sort of defined at least my path in animation. If I go backwards, I recently directed a Night at the Museum animated film for Disney Plus, and that was amazing. I got to work with Shawn Levy, the director of Deadpool and Wolverine that just came out. He was an awesome, I would say, mentor to me, and I feel like I've taken a lot of his, and even this at this point in my career, there's always still something to learn, and it was really cool working with him on that. And then if I go back in time to what got me that job, it was actually, even though I did Muppet Babies in between these two, but Legend of the Three Caballeros was it was basically the first Disney Plus original, because we were working on that before Disney Plus was a thing.
Yeah.
We were originally going to either put it on Netflix or Amazon, as Disney's first attempt at binge viewing. Like basically you drop a season, everything connects, and it's the complete story, even though it's episodic. And during the process of production, our team, we had we were in a team called Labs at Disney, which was housed in interactive consumer products and publishing. But it was this little bubble of experimentation. So this was actually an experiment. And
Mm.
they said, hey, don't give it to Netflix. We actually have something else. And it was the beta version of Disney Plus, which was called Disney Life. And
Wow.
so then we produced it for that, and then we actually used Three Caballeros to focus test the Disney Plus or the Disney streaming model, and then it launched with Disney Plus when it came out. Um,
Yeah, that's such a crazy thing to think about. Like, I remember when Disney Plus was being spoken of, the first thing I thought as a parent was like, great, another streaming service I'm going to have to subscribe to
yeah, I
probably.
know.
But I am a fan. I mean, seriously, now that they've started adding more adult, that sounds weird, but you know what I'm saying? Like things that I like to watch, like the Daredevils or the Deadpools or the other things. And my kid, he's 10, he loves it too, because just Gravity Falls, obviously another thing you've done, is a huge favorite as well. That is so cool. I mean, you have worked on and with some amazing people. It's just crazy for me to think about because of all the work that you've done. I'm interested to know, like, when you choose to begin a project or get approached to work on a project, what are some things, Matt, that are important to you that help you decide? Obviously, you have a family. To you can work from home, it looks like too, which is cool. So, but even that, you take time away from them. So, what is important to you? Is it story? Is it who you're working with? Like, what is a rubric to commit your time to a project?
I mean, I would say it's all of the above, but
Okay.
in terms of process, I'd say that, a strong foundation is what makes a good project, in my opinion, and playing to the strengths of that project and building outwards. So basically, for example, um, Muppet Babies, right? Um, the strength of Muppet Babies is twofold. One, it's you're building off of the Muppets, right? So like, you can't deviate from that, right? So that's why, rather than do another animated 2D version, we said let's do a 3D version where they actually look like the puppets. And let's play to that strength because the strength of the fur and the fuzz is what makes Muppets cool. They're almost tangible. And we also wanted something so a kid could see it and know that it's the same Kermit that they see in the Muppet movie. Um, so that being said, like that was the first strength of it. And then the second strength was um, targeting it more to preschool. And the reason for that is because the strength of the Muppets as a brand originally started at Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Like, Muppet Show obviously is a big one, but Kermit was on Sesame Street before the Muppet Show. So what you had is you had a whole audience that were able to grow up with Kermit and then be old enough to watch the older version of Kermit, which was the Muppet Show, which was a much more adult show. It was a prime time show. And then into the movies, which was a family experience. And it's not preschool, right? But if you take it back to Sesame Street, that's really the seed. And so that was our secondary foundational, you know, uh, pillar, I'd say, to say we need to make something that feels like Muppets and we need to make it for a budding audience. And we want to grow a new audience of people that appreciate the Muppets. And then we started there. And then once you know what that is, that's when everything falls into place because then the story comes out of that. Then the people that are going to work on it come out of that. And I got the pleasure to work with Tom Warburton, who came on as our exec producer. He did things like Codename Kids Next Door. I believe he worked on Fish Hooks. He worked on the 7D. We worked together on a show that just came out on Disney Junior called Kindergarten the Musical, which is, the musical, so that just premiered this month actually. And I helped him out with that. But that was definitely off the heels of Muppet Babies. Uh,
I
so
love
you,
it.
you can see it's almost like you have to plant a seed that plays to the strengths of what you're trying to make. And then everything sort of, if you allow it, naturally grows out of that like a tree.
Yes, I remember Kermit the Frog. He was like a reporter on Sesame Street,
Yeah.
right?
Sesame Street News. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there he is.
That's so funny. I said this to Eric Balza, like when you just a little snippet there, it's so surreal for me. A smile comes to my face because it's like my childhood is just reignited, uh, having an adult conversation, but thinking back to having grown up with that. Sidebar, I'm a little bit sad that, and a purist too, that, Muppets are being phased out of, California Adventure, at least in California. That 3D vision theater was always such a fun experience. And one day, if we ever go to Disneyland, he'll never get to see that, which is a bummer, because that is another tangible thing. All very cool stuff. Well, you're a parent, so your world is consumed with all this. Um, you don't have to share ages, but do they get what you do at this point in their lives? Like, dad draws, he directs, he voices, Ralph the
Yeah.
Wolf.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just-
I have two daughters. One is 8 and one is 3. And so what's
okay,
hilarious is they actually bookended Muppet Babies. So when my first kid was born was when I started development on Muppet Babies. And by the time we aired, she was in the age group. So she grew up watching it. And what's hilarious is I would say, like, Daddy's Kermit. And she would say, no, that's Kermit. She didn't get it. Now she does. Now she brags to her friends when they say they like something on Disney. They're like, she's like, my dad worked on that. So we've gotten there. Now my youngest is actually now just getting into Muppet Babies. Because again, we have Disney Plus, which is great because, as it sounds like a plug for Disney Plus, a lot of my work is on Disney Plus these days because I've been to Disney for a while. But now she's gotten into Muppet Babies, and now she's, playing with the Muppet dolls that my older daughter had. And so it's kind of nice to see sort of it have this cyclical life to it.
Was Muppet Babies a hard sell as far as like the initial process of it, of going, okay, we want to take this and create this world that you just described?
Yes and no. So originally it was a hard sell because we were not completely aware of why it needed to exist. Meaning, we had just inherited the Muppets as a brand into labs, right? And the idea was that they wanted to get the Muppets more on the internet, more onto like YouTube and things like that, which was a good play. But also they wanted to keep the adult audience that they already had, and so that's why they did the ABC show at the same time. But the issue is that we weren't aware that there wasn't a kid audience for Muppets because they weren't being drawn to the older skewing stuff, right? And the assumption was that they already knew who Kermit was. And unfortunately, they didn't. And we actually started digging in on research, and we did some focus tests, and we did a lot of just data mining. And what came out of it was that people who grew up in the 80s knew who Kermit was. People who grew up in the 90s didn't, because after 1990, Kermit wasn't on Sesame Street anymore. So now you have millennial parents who don't even really have a relationship with Kermit. And that was the aha moment. And that's where we said, got to get Kermit back into preschool. How do we do it? And I said, do we have the rights to Muppet Babies? And they said, yeah, why? And I was like, that's our in. And that's what we did. And after that, it was an easy sell. After that, it was like, let's go, and then we did a test. We showed it to, the entire Disney team. Consumer Products signed on right away. Disney Junior the next day said, we want it. And then it was blast off from there.
Really lightning in a bottle to have that many people sign off all at once and go, we want our hands on it, because that's not always the case in Hollywood, right?
No.
Especially when you are taking a globally recognized brand and trying to create something new out of it, which, but fortunately there was that slump where like I grew up in the 80s. Obviously I knew who he was. But then you have that group in the 90s, and especially having millennial parents, as you mentioned, not know who Kermit was.
Yeah, it was weird.
It is kind of weird to say that out loud a little bit,
I know. Everyone was shocked. One kid said, I think my dad likes that frog.
That would be my son. I mean, he obviously knows who Kermit is. And the Muppets and Gravity Falls, all the things that you've worked on. So you do other things too. You animate, you direct. Yep. Do you have one that you prefer over the other, or is it all just one fun experience for you getting to stretch your wings, so to speak, as a storyteller?
I mean, I'd say again, it's all of the above. I am a cartoon guy. Like, I like making cartoons, and I like every aspect of it, from the writing to the designing. I love to animate. I'm a traditionally trained animator. Originally, I was using X sheets when they were still a thing, and
wow.
shooting on cell as my first job in animation. And then, but I love storyboarding, and I love all. I love doing acting. I love doing the voices, But I would say, again, I always try to play to my strengths on what the task is, because animation is a team sport, right?
Right.
So everybody has their jobs, and having one person who does it all is great in theory, but they can't do it all. Like, I can't do a whole cartoon by myself. It would take me forever. So I need a team. I need to be able to delegate. I need to be able to count on people who are better than me at certain things, that draw better, that write better, that do voices better, like Eric Bauza. Like I'm never gonna try to battle
Well,
that
you
guy.
do a really good job. I mean,
I appreciate it.
not to interrupt you, but I mean, the Muppet voices just specifically comes to mind. I mean, that's really good. The fact that you get to do it is really cool.
I,
I
I,
apologize.
I agree, and again, but it was one of those things. I had to audition for that. I didn't. They didn't just hand it to me. I did all the voices in the scratch for the test that we did, so that's how I got into the mix. But I had to audition just like everybody else, and I went through 8 rounds of callbacks and different tests where they were throwing stuff at me. Because there was the other fear of like, even though I do voice act, that's not my number one job. You know what I mean? Like directing cartoons, that's like if there's one thing that I always come back to, it's that as like that's really what I do. And so I had to prove myself. But as I was saying, the my job depends on how I best fit. So sometimes I'm just a writer. Sometimes my strength lies in the writing. Obviously, I can work on other things. Mostly, my strength lies in the directing. That's usually what I do. But sometimes it's design. Like sometimes if I'm like, hey, I think I can drive the art direction on this. I do that. Depending on what the project is and where I fit in the best. You know what I mean?
I do. So I want to fast forward to in this day and age, we have so many distribution systems, so to speak,
Yeah,
social,
it's a little
uh,
overwhelming.
a little overwhelming. I'm talking like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, like hence why there are so many podcasts out there or shows, Blippy, that just all these, you're laughing. Did you ever
Yeah.
get into that? Did your
No, but
kids?
I'm very aware of it.
Okay. My son was so into him, but they switched all of a sudden to a different guy. But I digress. It got really weird. It wasn't the same person, but
Like it's like Lassie, right? It's like
yeah, it's like that's not the same Lassie. But my point being, anybody watching and listening to this conversation that has a desire to create, to voice, number one, what advice do you give to them to do that? And number two, is there really no excuse? Obviously, you have to have opportunity, either, connections. It's who you know, all of that's important. But at least in the beginning process, is there really any reason why somebody who has a desire to create shouldn't just start creating and putting stuff out there and taking those risks? Maybe they'll get discovered, or maybe it will lead them to other opportunities, doing bigger things, so to speak.
yeah. I mean, so the short answer is yes, you should just make stuff. Now, obviously, things cost money. It takes time. Sometimes, if you're not equipped to do all the jobs, you need help. There's all sorts of factors that can like kind of hold you back. So, I would just say the number one thing is, if you want to be someone who gets into this business, make a portfolio. Even if you haven't had any professional work, go online, check out successful looking portfolios. They're all out there. People put their portfolios online all day. Everyone has a website. Build a portfolio, but play to your strengths in that portfolio. If you don't be a I can do everything person. If your strength is storyboards, lean in on storyboards and focus on that. If your strength is design, lean in on design. You can also have storyboards. You can also have design, but make sure that you focus all of your attention on the thing that you're best at to start, because that's going to give you the best leg up when it's showtime. The second thing is absolutely make something, whatever it is, even if it's a piece of art or a little toy or a button or a short. Like my the way I got into the industry, really, like I was already working in animation a little bit because I had a portfolio and I started as an intern, and I was working actually my summers during high school at an animation studio. That's how I met Bauza, actually. And then, but I made a film. I made a little short film, and I just played to my strengths. I knew that I could animate really well. I wasn't a great writer at the time, but I could write songs really funny. And I partnered with a guy named Eric Pringle, who is currently the animation director on Teen Titans Go, among
Oh,
other projects. He's a fabulous, fabulous animation director. And we made a short film together, and we made a doll, and we put it out in the world. And this is like before YouTube was even a thing. We actually just made a website, We created a doll. I got a few back there. And we put the website on the tag, and we sold the doll at like Meltdown Comics and stuff. Eventually, that short made it to Warner Brothers, we produced it out of Flash because that was the best way for us to get it done. And then they hired us to do Mucha Lucha because that was the first Flash animated television show, and there wasn't anybody in the industry yet that had that kind of experience actually making television quality animation in Flash because it was all web-based stuff. So because we put that out into the world and somebody saw it, we were given the first opportunity to jump in on an opportunity on something that was happening. So that's, I would say, always make something, because that's and it's always something that you can point back to and say that I made it. But you'd be surprised how these things spread.
Yeah, that is very true. Especially again, with so many distribution systems that are out there, you just never know. Like you could get the call and be like, "Hey,
Yeah.
we need you to work on this, or can you talk to us about this?" As a animator, again, technology has changed over the years. You mentioned cells. Do you have a favorite type of animation that you have done that is a preference to you, or do you embrace the technology and go, okay, I don't know. There's
Yeah.
something to be said about, cell animation. It's handwritten, hand drawn. It's just different. But again, back to the Don Bluth era of drawing everything, you know, uh, page by page. I mean, animation takes a long time anyway, but it's probably sped up a bit, I would think, with the technology that exists now. In some
It
ways, maybe.
it has, but then because of that, the quality bar has been raised, the complexity has been raised. So in a weird way, like as the technology makes things faster, the creative then fills in that time with making things bigger or more spectacular. As an example, I did a pilot. It's probably my most famous unaired pilot, and it actually got leaked recently, and it was the one that broke my heart the most in terms of not a show not going. It was called Shred Force, and you can
Okay.
look it up, and it was and that was me taking the technology at the time, and this is in like 2011, working with a studio that was doing really experimental stuff in the space of 3D 2D hybrid animation, and we did that, and we made that short, and it was badass, and it was probably one of the coolest things I've ever done to this day, and it actually got me a lot of work because it was one of those pilots that got secretly distributed around, and that's what actually got me onto Hot Wheels, to do 3 Hot Wheels movies that were in that same production style. So yeah, I don't know if I answered the question right, but
You did. Yeah. No, for sure.
there's again, it depends on the strength of the project, because if it's something that would be better served in CG, then I want to do it in CG. If it's something like I got to do Night at the Museum in 2D, which was a really cool thing. I hadn't done a 2D movie in years, and it was a really fun experience to kind of go back to that and actually try to figure out how to not rely on 3D as much. And I have to say, there's a fight scene at the end of that movie where the gang is in ancient Egypt, and the bad guy unleashes a army of 50 Anubis demons, and like our 10 main characters of Roosevelt and Sacagawea and everybody all have to fight them, and it's probably one of the best fight scenes I've directed in a long time. And we weren't able to rely on 3D for all that stuff. We had to actually plan it all in 2D, and I actually think it turned out pretty well.
Yeah, that was a great one too. We got to watch that a little bit earlier just because of being press. Very cool. This is just so fascinating to me. Well, I know you have other things you're working on, probably things that you can't talk about, but I'm interested to know, at the end of the day, like when you look back at all of this, what does it feel like to just think about the fact that you've impacted people's lives? I mean, in so many different facets. Like it's crazy to think, but so believable because you're just a very talented person.
I appreciate that, and I got to say, it's easier now with social media being the way it is, because a lot of the stuff I did previous to I'll just say, the teens, the 20 teens, that I really didn't know whether or not people even watched it, and so what's interesting is now having like sort of a reach on social media and having a relationship with fans and things like that. It's wild seeing the fan bases that have developed. So, I have a fan base for Muppets that are Muppet people. I have a fan base for the Duck people, that love, the things like DuckTales and, the Donald Duck comics and, all the Disney comics in Europe. And that's a whole group right there. And then I have a fan base for Dan Versus, which is a show that I produced and directed for the Hub in like 2009 or something like that. And it was a great show. And it was a really funny, it was almost a primetime show for kids. And that has its own fan base. Shaolin Showdown. There's a whole, every time Shaolin Showdown news comes out and I post something like some art that I have, because I developed and designed that entire show. And I directed a lot of it. And I did all the showdowns for the first season, and second season. Not all of them, but a good portion of them. And it's wild that like suddenly I'll post just a little drawing of Omi or something, and then suddenly it's like I wake up and I got 1,000 more followers because there's a whole fan base that I didn't even know existed, which is just wonderful. And it really, really, it definitely drives me because I make this for you. My favorite thing to do when I make something is to show it to people, and almost like I like to sit in the front when I do any sort of premiere, because I actually like to just turn around and watch everybody's faces, because it makes me happy. It's like, did the joke land? Did they laugh? They did, and that's even why I'm kind of a weirdo for this, but I actually really enjoy focus groups for that reason. I like watching them because I like seeing what the kids are responding to. And it's fun. It's fun for me to see like, oh, that joke didn't land, and when we dipped, but then that fart joke got us back up to a 9. And it's just, I love it. It's just fun for me to watch, and I love hearing what they have to say afterwards, good and bad. So I don't know. It has really, really, I think, reinvigorated me a lot seeing the online fan base be so supportive and really appreciate the things that I've been able to show them and bring them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess that's the answer. It's a little schmaltzy, but
No, I love it. And I mean, a good fart joke always elicits a good response from a 10-year-old
yeah,
or a 50-year-old. So
yeah.
such
Fart
as
jokes
myself.
up. They have to be good, because if fart jokes aren't good, that's why fart jokes get a bad rap, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of bad ones out there.
Yeah, that is true. Well, one last question. So taking back to the Muppet Babies, and we'll probably clip this part too, but so you get the job voicing these different characters. Had you been working on this knowing that you were going to have an audition? Were these voices that you played around with to get the job? Like,
Yeah.
Swedish Chef or Ralph or any of the ones that you are credited for voicing? Like, even to get to the scratch work is one thing, but then to actually book the job, which is something Eric taught me, about. He had been doing these voices,
Yeah.
did scratch work forever, and then said, "Hey, we want you to play Bugs or Daffy or whoever."
Well, so it's funny. So I had already been doing those voices since I was a kid, because they were actually the easiest voices for me to do, the Muppet voices. So and actually Kermit, I found out I could do Kermit because I would do an impression of my father, and he would go Matthew when he would get mad, and he would get into is weird, like his voice changed. Like when he usually talks, he talks like this, but then when he would get mad, he would go, Matthew, what are you doing? Stop it. And it was like this weird thing. And then I realized, oh, that's kind of like Kermit. And then I started doing Kermit, and then suddenly I'm like, oh, I can ROWLF too, and I can hit the Swedish Chef noise wherever it lives in my throat. And even Statler and Waldorf, I knew I could do this guy as well. And what was wild is I was already doing those voices just for fun for years and years and years. So when the time came, I'm like, well, I'll just do the scratch. But then what came back is wow, you actually sound pretty good. Like your pipes must be similar or something like that. Even to the point where I was lucky enough to have the Hensons approve my Kermit before or give their blessing. And it's funny because I still work with Lisa on some stuff. We're working on some secret projects together. But it was really neat hearing people go, you know what, like you're pretty close. And that was just kind of cool. And then it kind of went from there. Even Shaggy, like the reason why I used to do Shaggy from Scooby Doo was because I just did it all the time at the studio at Warner Brothers. And there was a point where they needed someone to fill in for Casey while he was too busy or stormed out, or he did. Casey Kasem did some. He every now and again he'd get a little tired of being in a record, so he would say, "I'm Casey Kasem and I'm out of here," and then they would go. And I was a storyboard artist upstairs, and they go, Matt, can you come down to the recording booth? And I go, why, hey, Scoob, and then I would do Shaggy for like a DVD extra or a cereal commercial or something. So a lot of the voices that I get to do seem to be a result of me just doing them all the time anyway, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, even in
I
your
love it.
natural speaking voice, yeah, I hear Kermit.
Yeah,
I think
it's in there. Yeah.
he's living inside there somewhere in the bowels of your throat.
Yeah.
Very cool, very fascinating. If people want to connect with you on social media, find out some of the things that you've done, if for some odd reason they're not familiar with the millions and millions of projects you've either voiced, written, storyboarded, or directed.
Thank you. Yeah. So the easiest way, if they want to like engage with me online, is on Twitter, or I guess X. I still call it Twitter. And that's at Maddie with a Y Danner. And that's my main social media thing. I'll probably end up. I have some projects coming out soon that will require me to be on more platforms, so that will be a thing. But for right now, Twitter is the best way to find me. And then I do actually have something to plug.
Go ahead, please.
I can't say exactly what it is in terms of specificity, but I can say that I'm currently directing a Diary of a Wimpy Kid animated movie for Disney Plus.
I love those.
And it's coming out next Christmas, not this Christmas, but Christmas 2025. And it's going to be good. I'm actually working directly with Jeff Kinney, the author of all the books. He wrote the script. And he's my producing partner on it. And he is a wonderful, wonderful producing partner. And we're producing it through 20th Century Feature Animation at Disney. And that team is wonderful as well. The 20th Century team is just great. And I love working with them. I did a museum with them as well, and have done some development with them on other things. But yeah, so that's the big one that's coming out soon. It's a secret, not so secret project, because there's already 3 animated versions of Wimpy Kid that I helped out with a little bit. I didn't direct, but I, did joke punches or helped, with notes on story. So there's 3 out already, and this will be the 4th. With the hopes to do even more.
I love those movies. My kid has read every single book more than once.
Books are great.
Anytime a new book comes out, Jeff is a dream guest. He just like, and the movies, like the live action movies, were amazing.
Have you had him on? Have you interviewed him?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not.
I can put in a good word.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. That
Okay.
would be great. But also, like the cartoons, the films are just amazing. I love them. I could watch them even without my kid around, because they're just so funny. Very cool. Matt, thank you so much. I'm glad we were able to make this happen. And I appreciate your time greatly.
I appreciate you giving me the time. I appreciate that you appreciate things. What can I say? It's nice. I love it when people care. And I love it when people care enough to like talk about it and geek out about it. And, and I love your work, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
100% likewise, my friend.